My name is Marjorie Layton. I'm 63 years old. Most mornings, I wake before sunrise, make tea, and listen to the city hum itself awake beyond the curtains. I've always liked routines, the small, reliable things that make life feel manageable. After my husband passed, that sense of order kept me steady, bills paid on time, garden trimmed, pantry alphabetized. When I took a part-time job handling accounts at the public library, it wasn't for the money. It was just nice to feel useful again. Lately, though, my son Caleb had been distant. He lived with me after his business slowed, promising it would be temporary, but months stretched on, and something in his voice changed. I started to hear impatience where warmth used to be. So, one Thursday evening, I decided to test it, a foolish impulse. Maybe, but I needed to know. He was eating leftovers at the counter when I said it. "Caleb, I got fired today." I expected a startled look, maybe a hand reaching for mine. Instead, he froze, then set his fork down with a clatter. "Of course you did," he muttered. "You've been distracted for weeks." I blinked. What?" He laughed under his breath, sharp and humorless. "Mom, you don't have to pretend you're keeping things together. Maybe it's time you stop trying to prove you can handle everything." The words sank into me like heavy stones, each one folding decades of unseen sacrifice into the cold air. The words landed heavier than they should have. I waited for him to soften, to say he didn't mean it, but he didn't look up. "I didn't want you worrying." I said quietly, "I already do." He snapped. "You won't let anyone help, and then you fall apart. It's exhausting." My throat tightened. I wanted to tell him it wasn't true, that I hadn't lost my job, that I'd actually been promoted to lead accountant that morning. But the lie had already unspooled. And now it felt like telling the truth would only humiliate me further. He gathered his plate, rinsed it, and left the kitchen without another word. The sound of his door closing upstairs echoed through the house like a verdict. I stood alone by the sink, the light over the stove flickering against the window. Outside, the street was quiet, lined with the same maples my husband planted decades ago. Their shadows moved slightly in the wind, restless, uncertain, the way my home suddenly felt. The next evening, dinner felt like a formality we were all obligated to survive. Caleb sat across from me, scrolling through his phone between bites of overcooked chicken. His wife, Erin, filled the silence with polite questions how the library was doing, whether I'd seen the news about the new park opening downtown, but her tone was detached, her smile thin. I answered with the same surface-level warmth she offered, careful not to stir the air any more than it already was. Every sound in the kitchen felt amplified, the scrape of forks, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft tap of her nails against the table. We used to laugh at this table once, back when Caleb was a boy who couldn't sit still long enough to finish a meal. Now, even breathing at the same pace as him felt intrusive. "I might be late tomorrow," Caleb said finally, eyes still on his phone. "Meeting about a new project." Erin nodded, then turned to me. "It's good you're taking time off. Marjorie, you've earned a rest." Her words lingered, too rehearsed, as if she already believed I was unemployed. I forced a smile and took another sip of water to keep from replying. When I stood to clear the plates, my eyes caught something half-tucked beneath a stack of mail on the counter, a glossy brochure, the kind realtors use for open houses. Across the top, in bold blue letters, it read, "Everett Street Properties." The image of our street, our home, staring back at me, felt like a claim made on the life I had built for decades. My heart gave a small, inexplicable twist. That was our street, our home. The image on the cover was of a house not unlike mine, fresh paint, manicured lawn, the sort of picture-perfect calm that never tells you who had to leave for it to look that way. I slipped the brochure back under the envelopes before they noticed. Erin laughed at something Caleb said, a soft, practiced sound that didn't reach her eyes. I rinsed the dishes in silence, the smell of dish soap and lemon cutting through the stale air. For the first time in years, the house felt unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. And I was just visiting. It's strange how the small things come back to you, once the air in your own house turns foreign. The distance hadn't appeared overnight. It had been creeping in quietly, wearing a familiar face. I remembered the first time I noticed it, Caleb had hired a plumber to redo the upstairs bathroom without mentioning it to me. When I asked, he said lightly, "It's just easier if I handle these things. Mom, you don't need to worry about it." I told myself it was kindness, that he was trying to help, but it happened again. And again, new locks on the back door, insurance policies renewed without my signature. Each time I convinced myself it was nothing worth a fight. Then there was Erin, always careful, always courteous, but never warm. She'd make comments about how big houses can feel lonely or how retirement communities are safer these days. She smiled when she said it, but there was calculation in her eyes, like she was testing how much I'd resist before I gave in. This afternoon, while sorting through the mail, I found a notice from the city. Property taxes overdue. The date stamped in red was nearly 3 months old. My name was printed beside Caleb's, though I'd never added him to the account. Beneath it, a second envelope opened already contained a reminder about unpaid utility fees. A chilling certainty settled in the life I thought I controlled, had quietly shifted into their hands. A slow, cold clarity settled in. Caleb must have been intercepting the letters. He'd told me more than once, "I'll handle the bills. Mom, you should rest." I sat at the kitchen table, the papers spread before me, the sunlight spilling over the ink like an accusation. I had trusted him to help, to protect me the way I once protected him. Now I wasn't sure who was taking care of whom or at what cost. The house had grown unnervingly quiet in recent weeks, as if it were holding its breath. I had started keeping to my room more often, reading in bed until late just to avoid the silences downstairs. That evening, I sat with a book open in my lap, pretending to read while the sound of rain tapped against the window. Then I heard it, Caleb's voice, low and sharp, coming from the hallway outside my door. He was on the phone, pacing. "She thinks she's broke," he said. His tone carried a note of impatience, the kind he used when talking to contractors or debt collectors. "We'll get her to sign soon." My chest tightened. A moment later, Erin's softer voice drifted through the crack beneath the door, half amusement, half relief. She laughed quietly. "You're handling it perfectly. Just keep her calm." I froze, holding my breath so even the creak of the floorboards wouldn't give me away. I could hear the faint rustle of papers, the sound of Caleb opening the kitchen drawer where we kept the household documents. "Once it's signed," he continued, "the process will move fast. She won't fight it. She trusts me." The words slid under my skin like ice. I pressed my palm against the bed frame, steadying myself as the room seemed to tilt. The voice I'd known since his first word now sounded like that of a stranger, measured, deliberate, hiding something I didn't want to understand. Their footsteps moved toward the living room. Erin murmured something I couldn't make out, and then a door shut softly. I sat there in the dim light, staring at the wallpaper pattern until it blurred. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, that there was some innocent explanation, a new loan, a business deal, something that had nothing to do with me. But in the pit of my stomach, I already knew better. The rain kept falling, steady and cold, and every drop seemed to echo the same word I was too afraid to say aloud. Morning came pale and gray, the kind of Portland morning that never fully wakes. I moved through the motions quietly, tea, slippers, the sound of the kettle clicking off. Caleb and Erin were already downstairs. I heard the faint clatter of dishes, the low hum of their voices blending with the steady rain outside. I almost stayed in my room. Almost. But something made me stop at the top of the stairs. Their words carried more clearly than they should have. Erin's voice came first. Smooth and practical. The way she spoke when she thought no one was listening. Once she realizes she can't pay the taxes, she'll have to sell. There was a pause. Then Caleb answered, "Good. We'll finally get the house back on the market." My breath caught, sharp and painful. I pressed my back against the wall, gripping the railing to steady myself. Erin poured coffee. "We can use the equity for the new place. It's perfect timing before the market dips again." Caleb sighed. A tired sound that used to mean long hours at work, but now only meant calculation. She won't argue. She trusts me. I'll tell her it's the smart thing to do. My world narrowed to the sound of their voices. The kitchen, the same one I'd spent years repainting, where my husband and I had hosted every birthday, every Christmas, now felt like a stage set for strangers. Erin laughed lightly. "Maybe we should start looking this week. I found a listing in Lake Oswego with a big yard. Once she's gone, it'll finally feel like our space." Gone. The word hit harder than anything else. Not moved, not retired, gone. I turned away, careful not to let the floorboards creak. My husband and I had bought this house 36 years ago, when we were young and too optimistic to think of loss. Every wall, every floorboard carried our story. He'd built the front porch himself, sanding each rail until it gleamed. I could still picture him kneeling there, smiling at me through sawdust and sunlight. Now the son he'd raised wanted to sell it all for profit. I stood in the hallway, hands trembling, tea cooling in my cup. The voices downstairs softened into laughter. I didn't hear the words anymore, just the sound of something breaking inside me. Quiet, but final. Sleep never came. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the rhythm of rain against the windows blurring into a single, endless sound. My mind kept circling back to the same images: Caleb at 12, grinning as he handed me his first paycheck from the hardware store; Caleb at 20, pacing in our kitchen the night before college, worried he couldn't afford tuition. I had written him a check that night without hesitation. "Pay me back when you can," I'd said, though I never expected a cent. Now, I wondered what had changed between that boy and the man downstairs making plans for my house. I kept trying to find a moment where it all shifted a crack in time, where love turned into something else. Quieter, but colder. At some point, I sat up and switched on the bedside lamp. The small pool of light felt almost defiant. I opened my drawer and took out the worn family photo I'd kept for decades: Caleb, with missing front teeth, his father's arm around both of us. I traced my husband's smile with a fingertip. He would have known what to do. He always did. But this was my home now, my life, my fight. Somewhere in the night, the grief began to change. It was still there, but it stopped hollowing me out and started filling me with something steadier, heavier resolve. When the first pale light of morning slipped through the blinds, I went to the window and looked out at the wet street, the maple leaves glistening under the street lamp. My reflection stared back, tired but clear-eyed. "If you think I'm weak," I whispered, "you've forgotten who raised you." The morning after that long, sleepless night, I made tea and didn't drink it. The cup sat cooling beside me as I opened the drawers of my desk one by one. For years, I'd kept every record receipts, mortgage papers, tax forms, because my husband had always said, "Paper tells the truth when people forget it." By mid-morning, the table was covered in yellowed folders and rubber bands. I worked slowly, methodically, separating the old from the current, scanning each page for what I needed most: proof that the house was not Caleb's, not Erin's, but ours, mine. In the back of a file labeled Household Repairs 2007, I found a notarized copy of the deed, my name and my husband's, side by side. I exhaled. the first breath that didn't hurt in days. Beneath it, tax receipts and insurance records stretching back decades, all signed by me. I spent hours assembling them in careful order, until every fact was neat and undeniable. When I finished, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old contacts until I found the name Evelyn Price. Evelyn and I had worked together at the high school years ago. She handled administrative accounts before moving into property law. She answered on the second ring, her voice still bright and brisk. "Marjorie, it's been forever," I told her, as simply as I could, what was happening. She listened without interruption. When I finished, there was a pause. "You did the right thing calling me," she said finally. "Bring every document you have. We'll make sure the house stays where it belongs. And update your will while you're at it. Quietly." That word quietly stayed with me. By afternoon, I'd changed my bank passwords, secured my savings, and moved the most important folders to a small safety deposit box at the credit union. The clerk there didn't ask questions, and I was grateful for that. Walking home through the drizzle, I felt lighter. The fear was still there, but it had form now, something I could hold and face. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't waiting to be hurt. I was preparing to be ready. They called it a family talk. Aaron's text arrived mid-morning, short, polite, and impossible to refuse. "Dinner tonight. We should go over some things about the house." By the time I came downstairs, the dining table had been cleared. A pot roast simmered in the oven, the smell filling the air with an odd kind of performance. Caleb poured wine, his tone light, practiced. "You've seemed stressed lately, Mom. Aaron and I thought maybe we could help." I took my seat, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. Erin slid a folder across the table, her smile tight. "We've spoken with a financial advisor," she said. "The property taxes are too high for you to manage alone. If you let Caleb handle them, we can refinance the loan. Consolidate payments, it'll make things easier." Her voice softened on the word easier, as if she was handing me mercy rather than deceit. Caleb nodded quickly. "All we need is your signature. It's just a formality. You'll still live here." "Of course." I opened the folder. Legal jargon filled the page. But Evelyn had already shown me what to look for. The transfer clause sat there like a trap, subtle, hidden in language about management rights. I closed the folder, set it back on the table, and looked at my son. His eyes flickered, searching my face for the usual hesitation, the mother who would stall, smile, and forgive. "I appreciate the effort," I said quietly, "but the house isn't yours to manage, and I'm not your burden to carry." For a moment, no one spoke. The clock ticked softly on the wall, a sound so steady it might have been the heartbeat of the house itself. Aaron blinked. I don't understand." "You will," I replied. "I've spoken with my lawyer. Everything is already settled." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You what?" "The ownership documents have been updated," I said. "The taxes are paid. The locks will be changed by morning." He pushed back his chair, anger flaring in his eyes. But I stood first. My voice stayed calm. "Dinner smells lovely. I'll eat later." As I walked upstairs, the house felt solid again beneath my feet. Every step a reminder of who it still belonged to. The fallout came quietly, like a slow change of season. Within weeks, Erin packed her things and left, leaving behind only a few boxes in the garage and a silence that felt almost merciful. Caleb tried to keep his business afloat, but word spread fast in neighborhoods like ours. Contractors stopped calling. Clients vanished. I didn't celebrate any of it. I simply went on with my days, steady and deliberate. Evelyn handled the sale papers, and when the house finally changed hands, I stood on the porch one last time, watching the movers carry out the last of my things. The maple trees whispered in the breeze, their leaves brushing the roof like a farewell. I settled every debt, tied every loose end, and moved into a small apartment overlooking the Willamette River near Selwood Bridge. The first night there, I left the windows open. The sound of the water filled the room, constant, alive, unjudging. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened. There was no one to explain myself to, no one waiting for me to fail, just the river, the quiet, and the soft sense that freedom doesn't always arrive with joy. Sometimes it comes wrapped in loss and still feels like peace. Spring came early that year. The rain eased, and the cherry trees along the river bloomed pale and delicate, like a quiet apology from the world itself. I had grown used to my small apartment, the hum of the street below, the light filtering through lace curtains, the rhythm of living alone. Most days, I worked at the library, came home, cooked something simple, and read until dusk. Life had become manageable again, uncomplicated, peaceful. One Saturday, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Caleb stood there. He looked older, heavier, with the kind of wear that doesn't come from years but from guilt. "I didn't think you'd see me," he said softly. "I wasn't sure I would," I answered. He stepped inside, glancing around the small living room. His eyes lingered on the framed photo of his father and me by the bookshelf. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then his voice broke the stillness. "I never wanted your money, Mom." "No," I said quietly. "You wanted my silence." He lowered his head. "I'm sorry." There was nothing left to argue, nothing left to defend. I reached out, touched his hand briefly. "I know." When he left, the sun had already set. I stood by the window, watching the river catch the last threads of light. Then I walked to the porch and turned on the small lamp I'd brought from the old house, the one that used to burn through long nights of waiting. Its glow spread softly across the glass. I whispered to the quiet air, "This light isn't for waiting anymore, it's for peace." And for the first time, I believed it.